Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all to ET Health World webinar. To present this webinar, I welcome Ishika Multani, Executive Director at Sagar Group of Hospitals, and share valuable insights on the topic, Does Gender Help or Hinder Women in the Workplace? There will be a presentation on the topic, followed by a question and answer session, wherein you may submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect those and address them during the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Now I request Ishika Multani to start the presentation. Over to you.
Thank you for your kind introduction. Thank you to all the viewers for tuning in. Let me take a moment to celebrate the spirit of womanhood. This month, we've had International Women's Day that was celebrated on March 8, 2019. The theme for this year is gender parity, #balance for better. Let me give a brief on what gender parity really is. Gender parity is a statistical measure that provides a numerical value of female to male or girl to boy ratio for indicators such as income or education. For example, if there are 50% of girls and 50% of the boys who completed their primary education in a particular region, state, or a country, then the gender parity is 1. Please note in the beginning of our presentation to not mix gender parity to gender equality. Great strides have been made in the 21st century to create diverse workplaces which promote equality for all employees. Our growing awareness around the world of the need to break down gender barriers has led to many women entering into workplaces which were once male-only domains. However, gender still can have a negative impact on women when it comes to their careers. From the need to balance work with home life to the gender wage gap, women often find themselves working twice as hard to be recognized half as much as their male colleagues. There are many traditionally male fields like business and medicine which have seen an influx of women. However, a recent report of World Bank suggests that female workers in India have actually been on the decline for the last 25 years. The study looked at the census data from 1993-94 upwards to 2011 and 12 and determined that the participation of women in working world declined by 19.16 million between 2004 and 2011 and 12. There was a drop of 11.4% during the entire period of the study, with approximately 53% of the decline occurring in rural India for women between ages of 15 and 24. The researchers attribute multiple factors to this decline. Educational attainment, socioeconomic status, and household composition were major contributors to the drop. Researchers conclude that as family income becomes more stable, female family members tend to choose to drop out of the labor market rather than just join it. According to the writers of the study, awareness alone isn't enough. While it is helpful to promote education for girls and women and female labor force participation, more needs to be done. For example, we should create policies which focus on making female employment more socially acceptable and policies which invest in the economic sectors which are more attractive to women. The issue of gender in the workplace and how it impacts both men and women has its roots in the concept of privilege. The definition of privilege states that it is a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group. An individual can have a privilege because of their economic status, skin color, social status, and or gender. Women can lack privilege in workplaces because they are viewed as a woman first and an employee second. This can mean that their qualifications and experience are overlooked oftentimes in favor of their gender. Women are often seen as being less reliable in the workplaces because they must juggle dual roles as an employee and as a wife or a mother. Women also experience a lack of privilege in workplaces because they earn less than their male colleagues and are less likely to be promoted to the positions of power. According to the BBC, women accounted for only 11.2% of board members in Indian firms in 2015. Some progress is being made. This number is doubled from 5.5% of female Indian board members identified in 2010. However, India still lags behind the global average of 14.7% and the global leaders like Norway at 46.7% and France at 34%. Arundhati Bhattacharya, the first female chairman of State Bank of India, has fought to draw attention to the challenge of gender diversity in the workplace. She cites the 2000 ruling that publicly listed firms must have a minimum of one female director on their boards as one way to improve gender diversity, but states that, quote unquote, we need to stay on it for a few more years for it to have the desired impact. Major changes such as these will not have overnight, especially when we face cultural and social attributes which tend to view the working world as a fundamental and a basic male domain. Along the hiring policies, family-owned companies are also making strides to introduce more women into the upper echelons of business. While it used to be a standard practice for sons to inherit companies from their fathers, India is seeing a rise of wives, sisters, and daughters appointed to upper-level positions in their families. Naina Lal Kidwai, the former head of HSBC India, believes that will give women the chance to demonstrate their skills and abilities in the world of business, stating that, quote unquote, it's taken for granted that son will inherit the business, but now the daughter in the family will also get a chance to prove her mettle. And this may have a positive impact on succession planning in the future. While most women are achieving the board positions in Indian companies, the number of women in senior levels has fallen from 7.8% in 2014 to about 7.2% in 2016, a number which is well below the global average of 13.8%. One reason which I see why women are not achieving the senior level positions in India is that they are often seen as the primary family caregivers, often leading them to leave the working world midway through their careers because they are needed at home to fetch their children, to rear them, to look at the well-being of their parents-in-law sometimes. Some companies are beginning to introduce flexible working hours and other strategies to enable women to balance their home and professional responsibilities. However, a lack of support at home and an overall societal attitude that women belong at home make it difficult for many women to focus on their careers. Additionally, the gender pay gap, meaning the difference between what women and men earn, can soar as high as 27% in India, meaning that women earn 3/4 of their male colleagues, even when their experience and education is equal. Data collected for the Global Wage Report 2016 and 17 by the International Labour Organization found that India has one of the worst gender wage disparity in the world. In comparison, Singapore had the lowest gender wage gap at only 3%. And among the major economies, only South Korea had a bigger gap than India at 37%. The average worker in India has a better wage now than in the past. However, women and those living in the rural areas are still at a significant advantage. Thus, women living in rural parts of India are likely to be doubly impacted when it comes to wages. In addition, women in India make up to 60% of lowest wage bracket, but only 15% of the high wage earners. Gender figures into the wage gap largely because the educational choices made by women tend to lead to occupational segregation. Thus, women are overrepresented in the fields like education and nursing, career choices which are often undervalued because work in these fields may be viewed as natural female attributes rather than a skill to be acquired. Globally, the gender pay gap has been addressed through strong labor market institutions and policies which support collective bargaining and a focus on improving minimum wage. The gender pay gap is smallest at about 8% in countries where the collective bargaining is at least 80%. And the gender pay gap is widest in those countries which have weak collective bargaining and no or very low minimum wages. Global surveys have found that 2/3 of women believe that gender equality is unlikely to be achieved over the next 5 years. Areas such as socioeconomics, education, and gender challenges are barriers to both gender equality and women's success in workplace. For example, 50% of the respondents believe that addressing the issues of teen pregnancy and early marriage can also improve gender equality. When schools, families, and society teach children and young people that both genders are worthy of an education and equality in workplace, then we are more likely to see long-term shifts in attitudes about the roles of men and women, including the workplace. The McKinsey Foundation spent about 4 years drawing data on 279 odd companies employing more than 13 million people to determine how to bring gender diversity into workplace. Although this was an American study, quote unquote, Women in the Place of Work 2018 highlights a number of critical steps that can be taken to improve workplaces for men and women. At its core, the McKinsey Foundation urges companies to treat gender diversity like the business priority it is. It can include closing gender gaps in hiring and promotions, holding leaders accountable, and setting realistic targets for change. The McKinsey Foundation report urges that we improve representation from entry level to the C-suite level at corporates, ensure that the promotion happens early on in the pipeline so that women are better represented at higher levels down the road. Consider the factors that can play a role in women's workplace disadvantage, lack of managerial support, everyday discrimination, sexual harassment, to name a few. Offer employees opportunities to have flexibility to allow them to manage work and life responsibilities. Research conducted by McKinsey and Company argues that gender biases and stereotypes about women's ability in workplace are persistent problems that require a number of important interventions. Work-life balance must be emphasized for all employees. Employees should feel that their lives, their values, priorities are respected by their organization. To change the culture of an organization, we must first rework on how the organization views and treats its employees. Steps to take mindsets and practices. What we can do is we can make efforts to change individual mindsets and practices which we wish to change the overall workplace culture and impact of patriarchal culture on leadership must take a leading role to support gender equality in the workplace. Organizations must provide space for a dialogue so that all employees can speak freely about their experiences. Open environments are the ones which are conducive to change. They say that if you want a change, you have to be that change. To change workplace culture, we must redefine the concept of work. This can involve evaluating an organization's value system and its relationship with employees. It's not enough to change policies without addressing the power structures which are deeply embedded in the organizations. We cannot pay lip service to equality while allowing informal cultural norms and exclusionary practices to be perpetuated. Dialogues about gender in workplace are essential to reform our workplace culture and create a positive, sustaining, and effective which support all employees. An Indian CEO, Vaishali Kasture, recently shared her efforts to bring gender diversity in her workplace. Vaishali Kasture, the Managing Director of Experience Credit Bureau and Country Head of Experian India, states that inclusion riders may help to fast-track more women into the upper levels of the corporate world. She states that, quote unquote, if we take a linear approach on the gender gap, it will take us 150 years to bridge it, but advises that such approaches to inclusion must be company-wide and driven top-down so that it brings actual change, not just tokenism. Kasture has found that men and women are equally ambitious at entry levels, but that women's aspirations and ambitions drop by 40% after 18 months of employment because work environment affects women's progress. Within 5 years of starting work, she's found high levels of attrition among women as they are torn between work obligations and family obligations. She notes that Experian is addressing the sandwich phase of women, meaning when they are straddling child and elder care responsibilities. Her organization provides about 6 months of maternity care, creche facilities, open dialogues about gender and work-life management. She's found that men are more confident about asking for raises and promotions, and that women tend to underestimate their abilities, stating that, quote unquote, men ask for a bigger role when they are 70% ready. Women feel underconfident even when they are 99% ready. Even that 1% bothers them. The issue of underconfidence can be addressed through mentoring programs and sponsorship, which helps women to get to the next level of their career. Sponsorship is the secret sauce, she says. When a senior person who has a seat at the table puts skin on the game to make you successful, that is when confidence gap starts narrowing. Let's return to the original question. Does gender help or hinder women in workplaces? Clearly, in most cases, one's gender plays a major role in one's success in workplace. When it comes to the three P's, the position, the promotion, the pay, women in India, as around the world, are at a distinct disadvantage. It's more difficult to be a working woman than a working man. Although attitudes about women and work are beginning to change in India and around the world, concrete change has been slow in coming. And there are still major inequities which must be addressed. This raises more questions. How do we enact change? Do we focus one individual or do we focus on social change throughout our nation? Research on gender inequity in workplace suggests that education, awareness, and policies are essential to the shift, our collective understanding of women in the workplace. Why does it matter? The prospect of bringing about major social change can be very daunting. It may also be difficult for people to understand why gender equality is so important in the workplace. However, there have been multiple studies which demonstrate that gender equality is essential for a robust and healthy economy and GDP. Nations function more effectively when equality is in play. In addition, it benefits us all when we work together to ensure that our fellow human beings are receiving the equitable treatment in all aspects of life. To conclude, I'd like to say that we must work together to continue the gradual changes which have begun for women in India workplaces. Social policies, educational programs, and the political and public will to see real change occur will all play their part in shifting outdated attitudes related to gender and the workplace. What we need to now do is to create strong female leaders like Vaishali Kasture, Arundhati Bhattacharya, to provide guidance and leadership as new generations of potential male and female leaders try to determine what the workplaces of India's futures will look like. Thank you. I'm open for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Shira. So we'll wait a little for attendees to send in their questions. Oh, we already have a question right now. Yes, what measure are ensuring gender parity at Sagar Hospital? So directly to your organization.
Sagar hospitals, see in healthcare, we see almost 65% to 70% of the women workforce at the service levels. The four pillars on which the healthcare is resting, one among them, the strongest one among them is actually women. But as we go up to the C-suite levels, we see lesser and lesser women participating in the healthcare industry. But as for Sagar, being a gender neutral organization represented by women, I strongly being one of them representing the organization, we try to make sure that we have women at all levels of organization. So we very much take care of that aspect.
Yes. Next question. Fewer women are being hired by organization to skirt the 26-week maternity leave rule. So, what are your views on such practices?
Sorry, can you come again, please?
So the question is, organizations, they cut, I mean, they leave out on recruiting ladies because they have to provide 26 weeks of maternity, like because that's a rule. So, what are your views on such practices?
See, I would say we are in 21st century now. More and more skilled women are entering the workforce. Just because women are able to bear and rear children, this should not mean that we must rule them out. Women are an exclusive set of resources that organizations must understand to have on board. Organizations must look at creating a sort of a policy to allow the maternity leaves to be given to include women's lifestyles and allow the flexible timelines for women across the different horizontal and vertical strata of an organization to allow them to work. Um, I think it's very important to not marginalize women just because they would take off for a while. Remember, their productivity does not get lost just because they have taken off for a while. So I think most corporates and organizations, whether small, medium, or large organizations, must include women at all levels. Why I would like to say that further is because it brings in a rounded view of our own customers. If we have more and more women in the workforce, it allows us to understand our customers better. Please understand that the decisions of a household are mostly made by women, including budgeting, buying from retail, or healthcare decisions. Everything is made by women as a decision for their household. So why not have women on the board? Why not have women in the workforce at all times to have a rounded view of that?
Yes. Next question. Do you feel there should be proper guidelines and rules to ensure work and life balance?
Uh, to really instate the whole definition of work-life balance, I think each individual is very different in terms of understanding their own life balance. Certain people would like to take off from time to time because it really stresses them in the long working hours. Some people like to sit down and listen to music, not talk to someone. Some people would like to just take off completely. So each individual is very different in terms of balancing their work life. Irrespective of gender, whether male or female, work-life balance is very important, and this is a schedule that each individual will have to figure out on their own. What I can just say is that try and do what you love. Always look at a job as a satisfaction from a mental aspect rather than looking at how much it can pay you, because if you are good at your work, you are having passion for what you do, you're going to excel better than what you don't like and you get into doing that just because it's going to pay your bills a little extra. I think that kind of understanding and scheduling is very important to create that balance for each individual, irrespective of what gender you come from.
True. So we have a question that's also related to maternity leave. What do you think can be done to the roles which demands traveling, especially for women who comes back from maternity?
See, most of the organizations are quite understanding and quite inclusive of this sort of a situation wherein women take off for a while to have children, and post having a child, they come back to work. Most understanding organizations would understand the fact that women cannot travel because they have somebody waiting back at home. This is a change that has definitely come in over a period of time for a large number of organizations, I would say. So I think women can definitely voice their opinion, voice their mindset to their HRs. The human resources departments are existent in most of the corporates today. In the last 20 years, it has been made sure that every company gives an importance to a department like human resources, and there is something called as a grievance cell, and then there's something called as a concern cell. So in the concern cell, you can always voice your the kind of things that you're going through in your own life, and you can certainly ask for flexible working hours, and I'm sure most of the HRs will be able to accommodate you for that. Just about the kind of industry you are in is most important to look at. If you look at industries like technology, you really do not have to travel anywhere today. You can just sit at home and work from home. And in fact, most workforce is sitting from home and working from home. So that kind of a flexibility is coming through in many fields, except for the service industry, because that is where in most of the service level jobs, you might have to end up being available on floors to dispatch your job responsibility. But if the moment you are moving up to the mid levels and the higher levels, I think there is a greater flexibility that is available for you to be available during flexible hours. And I'm sure in most of these departments, you have your colleagues who are sharing your job responsibilities and job profiles, so they can always cover up for you.
Yes. So we have an extension to the last question. So it's are there any facilities that are provided to young mothers who are working in Sagar hospitals?
Yes, there are. In fact, we are located within our educational campuses. So we are in the premises where we have the luxury of having large premises around. So we have the krish facilities. In fact, we have the maternity leaves that we give to our expecting mothers. And post them coming, and we do have a very stringent policy to have our women workforce come back after bearing a child to the work, and our human resources department is extremely flexible in accommodating all of them. Without women, we actually cannot function because they are the pillars of our entire existence. So at Sagar, we take it uh, very seriously for all our women employees. In fact, we tend to also keep in touch with them even when they are away, so that they have that moral support at all times.
Okay. There's a question. Being from an entrepreneurial background like you, how would you? I mean, how do you figure it out? How difficult or easy for a lady to, propagate in being an entrepreneur?
Being an entrepreneur is not difficult. It's very important to prioritize what you want to do in life. First, introspect and understanding what your skill set is, where it lies. Do you have the kind of capability to endure things around you? Because sometimes it can so happen that you have to take it with a pinch of salt. Things may go in a direction that you may not have dreamt that it would. So it's very important to have that balance in your mindset first before you even start your entrepreneurial journey. So for me, that was very important, and being positive in your mind in whatever you do, because remember, with every failure, there is a success that follows. So what happens during your trial and error method should not define your success at all, because today's generation is somewhere running too fast and too quick, and because we are kind of having the exposure to the internet, we are in an information age, so we see other people achieving bigger heights, so we believe we can, but we really need to slow it down and take it at our pace. There are so many successful people who have tried their entrepreneurial journey in their 40s and in their 50s and 60s, etc., and have been highly successful in that. That's because wisdom teaches you how to take it slow. So for me, that kind of a thing worked more likely than anything else. It's more about your life skills, about yourself, about how calm you are in your thinking when everything else is going the other way around, and that's what is going to bring you success. And of course, the other common success formulas that we all will talk, you will have to have skills, you have to have people, you have to have funds. All of those other things are already checked in the checklist. Irrespective of all of this, every single individual can become an entrepreneur, and there is nothing that can stop them from being successful if they're steady in what they want to do. So being steady, being focused is extremely important.
Yes, very rightly said. The next question is like any change that we want to bring to our society starts from our home, right? So, what is your message to for the male members of the family towards believing gender parity right from home?
To all the men and the women of every single household out there, I'd like to just tell each one of you that women make 50% of the world. It's women with whom the man even starts to take shape and birth in this life. So it's very important to understand the importance of women, give them equal opportunities, do not have the mindset of marginalizing them for anything. Try and share responsibilities with women. If you are tired, they are equally tired. If you are going out, let them also go out. It's very important to lead this entire gender parity through a transformative phase together. If men are not in it, it is going to be very difficult for women to undergo the transformative change that we would like to have.
Great. So that's what we had time for today. So to wrap up this session, thank you, Ishika Multani, Executive Director at Saga Group of Hospitals, for sharing your valuable insights on the topic, does gender help or hinder women in the workplace? If you have any other questions, please send them at editor@ethealthworld.com. It was an engaging and insightful talk, and hope all the participants have enjoyed the session. The recording of this webinar will be made available on ethealthworld.com. Thank you everyone for joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you.